One, something is happening. You can feel a shift. You can feel the shift on the streets of New York. You can feel the shift in Madison Square Garden, an arena chanting USA. You can see the shift on the fields of the NFL where everyone is doing the Trump dance. It's a coming out party. There's a shift in our culture toward Donald Trump. 2, Bucks County, Pennsylvania says they do not care about the law. They will thwart the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to count illegal votes. And I'm sure they'll have cover from the mainstream media, who's absolutely cratered in ratings and trust. 3, the new cabinet includes a new commissioner for the FCC. Is it a come to Jesus moment for the internet and Saturday Night Live? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio market to market, always on demand. Hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify, download, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review, and then you will always have the Will Cain Show. We're always on demand and available every Monday through Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time at Fox News YouTube channel and Fox News Facebook page. We have been growing our audience in exponential numbers over the last 2 weeks. We welcome you in to the Willisha. What we want to ask you is to do 2 things. Drop into the comments section and become part of the show. We bring your comments onto the show. Something I'd like to begin here in the near future is to have your comments available for all of us to see as we watch the Will Cain Show, live stream of your comments. I've never wanted this to be a one-sided conversation. I've never looked for a pulpit or to give a sermon. I would have been a preacher. Instead, I wanted to have a conversation with you, the Willisha. And while you're there, there's a little text description underneath this live stream on YouTube. If you expand that, you'll see a button, or at the top of our live chat, subscribe to the Will Cain Show on YouTube. What an incredible weekend. What an incredible 2 weeks. And it's like, it's impossible because what we're seeing something is change in real time. I mean, you don't lift weights and see results on this kind of schedule. It's almost like putting your finger on the pulse of the culture and beginning to hear the heart race. Something's changing and it's shifting. People are coming out of hiding. People are proud. And they're proud of their support for Donald Trump. Let's get into that with story number 1. Saturday night, I went to UFC 309. It was a fun night. Got to hang out before I went with some of my old friends like Sage Steele from ESPN, some of my newer friends like Dan Bongino, and of course, my co-host from Fox and Friends Weekend, Rachel Campos Duffy and her husband, Sean Duffy. We were invited by former Navy SEAL, friend of the program, CEO of Born Primitive, Bear Hanlon, to go and watch Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Now, the fight, of course, was incredible. The fight itself was heart-pounding. But as is the case of several UFC events, before you hit the main card, there's a moment when the lights dim, American Badass begins to play by Kid Rock, and out walks the past and future President of the United States, Donald Trump, flanked by an entourage of RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Vivek Ramaswamy, Kid Rock, Dana White, and many more. Donald Trump walks into an arena to a thunderous crowd. Chants of USA fill Madison Square Garden. And then, after Jon Jones delivers a devastating roundhouse spin kick to the midsection of Stipe Miocic, he walks to the middle of the octagon and he does the Trump dance. Hops the fence and hands his title belt to Donald Trump. Watch. Listen. Jon Jones leaning down and giving his championship belt to Donald Trump, serving as acknowledgement as well. He shakes hands. He kneels in front of Donald Trump in a way that MSNBC is described as Caesarian. It's a moment like giving fealty to Caesar. I see it different. I see bravery. I see a moment that's a cultural shift in the United States of America because we saw this everywhere this weekend. I was listening to sports radio in Dallas, Texas, and all of a sudden I heard MAGA sentiment. I heard jokes about tariffs and vaccine lines and references to myocarditis on a sports radio channel that a few weeks ago would not have even touched such subjects. And then even in the NFL, when we saw guys getting sacks or scoring touchdowns, we saw on the field, again, the Trump dance. It's absolutely fascinating. Take a watch of what's happening right now in the NFL. Guys doing the shimmy, the Trump dance when they score. Black, white. No matter what team, there they are, celebrating Donald Trump. Friend of the program, Gad Saad, professor in Canada, said, don't think this is any small thing. Don't think this is any small moment. We're often ahead of the curve here on the Will Cain Show, and you'll remember a conversation we had like a week and a half ago about the shift in cool. Bridget Fataisi, also a comedian, talked about the shift in cool. These little moments represent something big that's happening in America. A big change. Not just over what's acceptable, but what is cool. I want to share with you a message that I got on Instagram. Will, I used to listen to you when you subbed on SVP and Rosillo. So this is dating back to my days on ESPN. And then I listened to you when you had your own show, The Will Cain Show. I have a genuine question for you, man. I tend to agree that there needed to be a cultural market shift correction. We've started becoming untethered to values. But is the constant worship and idolizing of one dude really the way this shift needs to take place? It just feels bankrupt to me, man. Help me understand. I know you're a thoughtful dude. All right, I'll hang up and listen. I think this is an interesting question coming from a longtime listener through multiple distributions and multiple platforms to the Will Cain Show. And it's something that I would have had some natural aversion to in the past. Hero worship, the worship of the man, the worship of politics. And I don't think that's what we're watching. I don't think we're watching worship. I agree if that were the case, that would represent some sense of bankruptcy. Place not your faith in man, but in God. Place not your trust in politics, but in principles. But I don't think this is to be ignored, what's happening. And I don't think it's bankrupt. In fact, I think we're cashing in on a huge moment. Andrew Breitbart often said that politics was downstream from culture. I agree. And what we're watching is a needed shift in the culture. I want you to look at this. I was walking through New York City's LaGuardia Airport. Now, when you walk through LaGuardia and you go through TSA, and as you walk towards your gate, you walk through sort of a mini mile. They've redone LaGuardia. It's a very nice airport now. You walk through sort of a mini mall, and you see, oh, there's the Bose head speakers. There's the Yankees and Jets gear. You know, oh, here's some jewelry. Here's some luggage to buy, some perfume. But front row center, as I was walking through LaGuardia, was an entire kiosk display of the type of material and merchandise that you would have normally seen on, honestly, the streets. I'm talking about the streets outside of a rally for Donald Trump. MAGA hats, MAGA sweatshirts. I'm voting for the felon T-shirts. Never surrender with mugshot of Donald Trump. Guys, this is something that if you wore 2 weeks ago on the streets of New York, you might have been spat upon. You certainly would have been sneered at. You probably would have received comments. And now it's on sale at LaGuardia. Now, maybe, you know, they have to attempt some sense of bipartisanship because I did see a much smaller kiosk just a few feet away with Harris Waltz gear, and it was marked 75% off. I actually don't think that markup's going to work. They're going to have to figure out some bigger markdown, or else that gear is headed to Africa for kids to wear in the same way they wear the loser of the Super Bowl gear. You know what I'm talking about, how they print like Super Bowl champion, you know, Buffalo Bills from the 90s when they lost 4 Super Bowls or whatever it may be. Super Bowl champion, they print it before the game because, hey, you never know who's going to win. You got to be able to sell right away. But who buys the shirt of the loser? No one buys the shirt of the loser. So it's all sent to needy kids in Africa. And somewhere out there, they're all thinking the Buffalo Bills of the 90s were a dynasty. Soon, those kids wearing Harris Waltz gear because 75% is not going to do it at LaGuardia. I'm just telling you something big is happening. And I don't think, to my longtime listeners, friends, this is something to be concerned about. I do not think this is bankruptcy. I actually think, as we watch John Jones, a black man, give praise publicly to Donald Trump, as we see NFL players, black men, celebrate the Trump dance. Yes, there's some sense of celebrating the celebrity, the man that is Donald Trump. But we are in need of a huge market correction. This is why I want to talk to you so deeply, and I will this week, about my friend Pete Hegseth's nomination to Secretary of Defense. We don't need corrections on the margin. We don't need Mitt Romney's Bain Capital corporate consultant marginal competency. We also don't need to necessarily root up everything from American culture and bureaucracy from the root up, but we definitely need a huge correction, a huge trim. Now, that's got to happen in the media. That's got to happen in comedy. That's got to happen in Hollywood. That's got to happen in music. It's got to happen in sports. And what's clear of the last 2 weeks is it was happening. It was just cowed. I had a conversation before UFC 309. I went to a dinner. I was hanging out with Bongino. I was talking about with some guys who are in PR and marketing and advertising, and some executives who are inside conservative media companies. And you know what we said is they were talking about how difficult, for example, it is to get a sponsorship, support from corporate America. Now, UFC, to Dana White's great credit, has said, I don't care. If you don't want to advertise with me because I'm going to speak at a Trump rally, there'll be somebody lined up to give me their dollars at UFC. But what we've seen is you name your brand, you name your NBC, Saturday Night Live. They have controlled the mainstream, and as such, they have controlled maybe not what we thought in all occasions, but what we thought others thought. They controlled what we thought was cool. But underneath that, you know, again, perhaps shy, perhaps scared, perhaps cowed. What's clear is there was a pent-up resistance, a pent-up acknowledgement of reality. And if you walk the streets of New York, or as I socialize in Dallas, what you're seeing is the coming out party. No, we will not be afraid. No, we do not accept the valueless cultures you've been pushed on us and told us that was cool. No, we are the mainstream. And we means America, from NFL end zones to UFC octagons, to right here on the Will Cain Show. We are America. Let's break that down with my friend from the New York Post, Karol Markowicz, next on the Will Cain Show. We don't need marginal change. We need big change in America. From the Pentagon to our culture. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe on Spotify or Apple. We'd love for you to join the Will Cain Show. Jump into the comments section on YouTube where you can hit subscribe and jump in and be a member of the Willisha. It's been a whirlwind. I think it's been a whirlwind for me, and I'm only downstream. It's been a whirlwind for the Will Cain Show, and we're only downstream. But it has been a whirlwind for my former co-host at Fox and Friends Weekend, now your new nominee for Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth has joined the cabinet nomination process. That includes Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and many, many more. It's continuing to take shape. Brendan Carr, who criticized Saturday Night Live for giving free airtime in violation of FCC guidelines, use of fair play and equal time for political parties, to Kamala Harris, is now been nominated as your new chairman of the FCC. What does that mean for Saturday Night Live? What's that mean for NBC? What does that mean for internet companies as well? That's coming up in just a moment on the Will Cain Show. But it's been a whirlwind for my friend Pete Hegseth. I want to address one particularly offensive, historically illiterate, demagogic attack on Hegseth, and that is his tattoos. They are nothing short, in my mind, of bigotry toward Christianity. Now, here's what has happened with Pete. He's having a life colonoscopy done in public. And one of the, again, more dishonest attacks on Pete is his tattoos. He's covered up in tats. I've never been a tattoo guy. Pete's a tattoo guy. And there's a suggestion that Pete's tats are white supremacist, that they're, I don't know, racist, that they are Christian nationalist. Pete has 2 tattoos that have come under scrutiny. The first, which I would suggest to you, were he someone who is ashamed of his tattoo or thought it was in any way controversial, he might not have taken his shirt off every year and swum with Navy SEALs on live television across the Hudson River. And that tattoo is on his chest. It's a Jerusalem cross. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I'll hold up a picture of that from my iPad. It's on his right pec. He's got a Jerusalem cross. Now, the Jerusalem cross is a big Christian cross with 4 smaller crosses in the corners of the big cross. It's been flown by Catholics, by Christians since 1096 as part of the Crusades. It's still used on many Christian versions of the Bible. It is used in Israel, in other places. It is historic. It is not, unless you're in the fevered pitch mind imagination of a rabbit hole crazed conspiracy theorist, somehow a white nationalist. The other one, which got him barred from the inauguration of Joe Biden on National Guard duty. If you'll remember, Nancy Pelosi had National Guard called to Washington, D.C. They were in parking garages ready to go, including Pete's unit in the National Guard. His commander said to him, "Hey, man, we're not going to need you this weekend. Stand down." He said, "Why?" And as it turns out, he had to learn through back channels, not directly. Some rando internet-crazed conspiracy theorist in the Guard submitted an email to superiors that said this tattoo, Deus Vult, on his bicep. I have it again up on the screens here in the Will Cain Show studios, was also somehow white supremacist or controversial. Now, Deus Vult is Latin for God wills it. It's also an ancient, been around for a long time saying. It's also Christian. Now, I don't know what I guess it's no more of an argument than this sounds something scary, and it is like 2 echoes removed from something that I might have thought once, or maybe if somebody dove down the rabbit hole and found some string that doesn't even exist in mainstream, or didn't before this absurd coverage on, for example, MSNBC. They might have found, I don't know, this one person used this one thing in this one scenario, ignoring thousands of years of tradition and mainstream assignment of these types of tattoos to mainstream Christianity. This is beyond absurd. It's defamatory. In my mind, it's defamatory towards historical literacy. Like, you're a boob and an idiot if you can't do a basic research on something with a millennia of history. And it's also pure bigotry toward Christianity. There's going to be a lot of stuff that continues to be lobbed the direction of Pete Hegseth. But I think this is symbolic of it all. It's all absurd. It's all designed to take down the man because the man represents a threat. A threat, I don't know, to DEI, to woke culture, to Pentagon budgets, where they've been missed 7 times in a row, missed their audits 7 times in a row. Ask yourself, you want competent margins, or how about somebody who really has a philosophical vision to fix the United States of America and, has some tattoos? Let's discuss this with the host of the Karol Markowicz Show. She also co-hosts Normally. She's also written Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. She's a columnist at Fox News and the New York Post. Karol Markowicz here on the Will Cain Show. Hey, Karol.
Hi, Will. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm glad to have you on. You just probably heard me talking about, and I am upfront with everyone listening. I'm upfront with everyone watching me on Fox and Friends. I'm upfront about all of my biases. I want the audience to know I have opinions. I want to share those opinions with you. I'm going to share those opinions with you. And I think by me being honest about my opinions, you can compensate. You can edge. You can say, well, this is where Will might not be 100% objective. And I'm here to tell you, I'm probably not 100% objective about Pete Hegseth. He is one of my very good friends in this life. I would suspect if I precede him in death, I would want him to be one of the men carrying my casket. So there. But then we get into why I feel that way about him. Just because I might not be objective doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I'm sitting here today saying, this is ridiculous what I'm seeing lobbed the way of Pete Hegseth. What do you think, Karol?
I think it's anti-Christian bigotry, and I think none of us should stand for it. It's absolutely unacceptable. The Jerusalem cross is not a Christian nationalist symbol. It's not a white nationalist symbol. It's none of that at all. It's an old cross that is completely acceptable. I mean, again, you made the point, but if it wasn't acceptable, if he was trying to hide it, why would he have his shirt off and show it to people? I think that that's just an easy call
Right.
to say that there's nothing controversial about it. I would add, he has the American flag on his arm. I think maybe in another location, he's got a lot of tattoos, right? That was called,
Yeah.
obnoxious or worse by Mara Gay of the New York Times. She said she was disturbed by the American flag. We can't let these people have an inch. We can't let them say that symbols that have been completely fine for generations and generations are now unacceptable to them. And they call everything Christian nationalist or white nationalist or whatever. I was surprised to learn, not that long ago, a writer for the New Yorker called anybody who supported school choice Christian nationalist. Now, I'm openly Jewish, but I'll take it. I'm a Christian nationalist who supports, privatizing education. Why not?
Yeah, and Karol, I think that's you threw that in at the end, but I want the audience to understand if there was anybody that might be concerned about Christian nationalism, it might be you. You're Jewish, and if there's anybody concerned about Pete Hegseth, it might be you, Karol.
Yeah, I'm not at all concerned about Pete Hegseth. I've had conversations with him. I think he's a fantastic pick. I was actually thrilled when I heard it, and I knew he was going to get pushback, but I just think we need to defend him. Not just because you obviously know him very well. I know him a little bit. Not because we know him, but because he is the perfect choice for this. He is the perfect man to go in
Yeah.
there, change the culture, and really up their numbers of people joining the military. I think he's such a great person to do that. I really see him doing a fantastic job. And that's the reason they want to stop him. They want the same old bureaucrats who aren't going to do anything and not change the game whatsoever. Pete Hegseth is not that guy.
And there's something else I want to say, Karol. And you said something interesting, and that is don't show any weakness, because these are not honest attacks. That's the thing about it. They're not honest attacks, meaning they don't truly care about the things that they're attempting to drag through the mud when it comes to Pete. It's other things. And I think there's reasons for that we can all articulate. Pete becomes a convenient target. By the way, it's also going to come for Tulsi. It's also going to be there for RFK. And of course, there's going to be attacks on Matt Gaetz. But Pete represents a combination of things that are particularly unappealing to the left and to the bureaucracy. And that is, for one, he works at Fox. And that has been public enemy number one for the better part of 2.5 decades. And so by proxy, attacking Pete is attacking Fox. And so you ask yourself, is that an honest attack on Pete? But here's what I really wanted to say about the dishonesty of the attacks. And you said, don't show weakness because you're dealing with a dishonest arbiter here. And I know that you're right. And sometimes I'm guilty of taking the bait, of counterpunch. But there are also attacks on Pete's character. And I hinted at this last week, okay? And I hinted at this when he first got it, and I rattled off a list of adjectives that I know about Pete. And one of the adjectives that I used was flawed, and he is. And I would say by that is if you're looking for perfection, someone who has never stumbled, then you're probably not going to get to Pete Hegseth. But you know who else you're not going to get to? Anyone else in America. Even though he's flawed, that doesn't mean what's being said about him is true. It's not. Many of these main stories are not true. But he still is flawed. He has made his mistakes in life, and he's owned those. He's, again, like his tattoos, talked about them on television. And what I would ask you is, I know these people. I'd ask you listening, and I'd ask you as well, Karol, I know a lot of these people. Their mistakes simply haven't been aired on television, haven't been there for you to see. You do not have a saint available. There isn't one. And we've been through this with Donald Trump. I do believe that character matters. I do. And I guess what I would testify to is character is more than the perfection of your resume or your life experience. Yes, your actions are the most paramount. But I also understand this man's and others' values, what they truly believe, even if at times in their life they have been unable to live up to their own values. And what I'm telling you is that is something to aspire to when you're looking at other human beings. Do they hold those values and hold themselves accountable for their own failures and their values versus do they not have the values, or do they pretend and hide and have it somewhere else that they have been this saint walking the earth, Karol?
Yeah, that's such a good point. Look, none of us are perfect, and Americans just went to the polls and overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump, who has also had personal failings. Look, and they decided, no, it doesn't matter to us. We're going to put that aside. He represents what we want to see in office. I think Americans are hungry for normalcy, for competency, just for sanity. And I think that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth represented in the same way to them. There's not going to be, this conversation around transgenderism, for example, under Pete Hegseth's watch. There's not going to be any kind of nonsense. And that's really what they want. They want to move away from the nonsense of the last 4 years. I really, again, I can't think of a better pick than Pete. I hope that he sails through the nomination process, and I'm going to be defending him to the end.
Well, I'm glad to have you. See, I'm glad to be there side by side with you on that wall, Karol Markowicz. Okay, now I want to talk more about the dishonesty, because I told you the lobs that are coming Pete's way are multi-motivational. One is he's Fox. Another is that he does represent to the status quo a threat at the Pentagon, and some of that's going to come from within the Pentagon. And to be honest, if I'm being upfront with everyone watching, some of it's going to come from rivals, too. We should understand that. Some of it's going to come from rivals. But I want to talk about the media. So these dishonest attacks come from an institution that has cratered. Karol, take a look at this chart for everyone watching. It shows trust in media over a long period of time. And the public does not trust the media. I think it's down around 30%, below 30% trust in media. Dana White, by the way, talked about this weekend at UFC, that the two groups that the Americans hate the most are the ones they trust the least, politicians and media. We can see that, Karol, as well, in the ratings for MSNBC and CNN this week. Now, I'm actually, in an attempt to be accurate, like after you lose an election, your audience gets depressed and they flee. They just do. But there's also like, how much trust have you lost? And if you'll see the ratings, Glenn Greenwald tweeted this out, like they're not getting 70,000 viewers in the demo. They're just not in the last week and a half. I saw this. You could take MSNBC and CNN, combine them, triple their ratings. It used to be a double. Now you triple their ratings and they don't achieve the numbers yet of Fox. I mean, I don't know if it's going to come back, Karol, but something big I feel like has been lost for mainstream media.
Absolutely. The lack of trust, even just setting that aside for just a second, the anger and the hatred and just the vitriol coming from MSNBC. I think even liberals are tired of it, other than like Keith Olbermann, who wants that to be at an all-time high. I have liberal friends who just don't want to do this again for 4 years, don't want to be watching the anger and the spittle on their television screens and constantly be afraid and angry at Donald Trump. They had 4 years. They saw he wasn't actually Hitler, and they're over it. So I think that MSNBC needs to sort of rebrand. And we've seen a little bit of this, of course. Today, the story broke that Mika and Joe Scarborough went to Mar-a-Lago and they met with Donald Trump. And of course, leftists are losing their minds about it. But what do they want to happen for the next 4 years? They want this show to have no connection to the president at all. I mean, all of that is really kind of just irrational. And I would hope that the media could tone down their rhetoric and make their supporters understand that this is the reality for the next 4 years. You want to oppose Donald Trump, oppose him. Don't turn him into a Russian spy again. Don't try to, make these insane accusations against him. Oppose his policies. Oppose what he actually does. But control yourself. This man has had 3 attempts on his life, 2 in the United States, obviously the third with the Iranian, plot against him. They need to tone it down. They need to relax a little bit. Look, last 4 years on Fox, you guys were not angry and yelling at the screen all the time. You found a way to oppose Joe Biden and to oppose Kamala Harris and not be frothing lunatics about it. I think that MSNBC should try to follow that model somewhat.
And honestly, I mean, how much better was CNN? Like not much, if better than MSNBC. And once you cross that barrier into CNN, you're actually, and then I would ask you this, how much different was CNN from CBS? And how much different was CBS from NBC? And how different is NBC from what at one time Vice was, and then Vice completely lost its mind? And then how different was Vice from, for example, Deadspin? And I know I'm like going around the concentric layers of getting you from what's acceptable mainstream into pure insanity, but I actually see all of them from MSNBC to NBC on the same path to irrelevance as Deadspin.
Right, absolutely. I think all of these outlets are in the same kind of leftist bucket where they're incapable of appealing to anybody outside this very narrow audience. Most of the country is not leftist, and we knew this even before Donald Trump's landslide win. They were appealing to this sliver of people who are just not representative of the country. Maybe they should try to kind of form new coalitions. Take a lesson from Donald Trump.
So, Karol, this is a big story. There's been a couple of big stories that have, I think, unduly floated under the radar with the whirlwind that is the win of Donald Trump and the appointments to the cabinet of Donald Trump. Some of those stories, they're getting big coverage now, are Daniel Penny's trial in New York, Laken Riley's murderer's trial in Georgia. I think a huge story was the revelation that FEMA, this is so gross and shocking, FEMA was discriminating against any people in need who also had Trump signage in their yard. Just absolutely gross. And then this is the most recent one from this weekend. And it actually dates back to last week, Karol. So this is the race for Senate in Pennsylvania is not over, although it's been called by the AP. Dave McCormick and Bob Casey are going to a recount. There's a fight over whether or not illegally cast votes, those where the signature doesn't match, so forth, will be counted. Now, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has weighed in and said, you will not count those illegal ballots. They do not count. I want you to listen to this, though, from the Bucks County Commissioners meeting. This is a commissioner within Bucks County and what she had to say about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
We reject all three categories of these ballots.
Your motion is to reject or dismiss the challenges in this category in front of you?
Correct, yep.
Not going to second that, mostly because I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
If I violate this law, she's going to violate this law, she wants the court to pay attention to it. I mean, all the talk, Karol, of like, don't question the integrity of elections and save democracy. And here, I mean, just in front of all of our faces, flouting, one of the pillars of our republic, which is the checks and balances of judicial, executive, and legislative, this time at the state level, Pennsylvania state level, of them ignoring the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And just, the comment that a lot of liberals made before the election was democracy is on the ballot. Turns out they were right, but maybe not in the way that they thought. The idea that she's saying, look, nobody follows what courts say anymore is just insanity. And this woman needs to be removed from her post. She needs to be arrested, honestly. This is, you're violating court order, Supreme Court order that says these ballots will not be counted. And she's saying, no, I don't care. We're counting anyway and try to stop me. I think they should try to stop her. And the fact that this is going to a recount, I hope that there are lawsuits here. I hope these people are held accountable, because what's happening is really far-reaching. This makes people distrust our system. When they see somebody like this say, I don't care what the courts say, I'm going to do what I want, that's what ruins trust in our system. And what I hope to see over the next 4 years is our system really gets stronger, and I hope to see a rebuild of trust. A lot of things stem from that in our society. I think when you have a low trust society, things break down. I would love to see the next 4 years of the Donald Trump administration build up our systems again, restore trust in order, and make people trust each other again.
And just to be clear for anybody listening, it's like, whoa, what about what was done 4 years ago with Donald Trump? What we're talking about now is not questioning the legitimacy of a vote in any given state, not about media manipulation. It's not even about suing for the legitimacy of some ballots. This is something different. Like if you're sitting there going, hypocrisy 4 years ago. What's different is one branch of a government, a county commissioner's court, overseeing an election result, is flouting openly not only another, but a superior branch of government to say, basically, like, do something about it. Like, what are you going to do, Pennsylvania
Yeah.
Supreme Court?
That's right. I'm like you. I left New York. I live in Florida now, and they have this really crazy system down here where you show your ID and then your signature needs to match the ID. It's quite a whirlwind over here when we vote. But we had our votes counted very quickly, and the process is so orderly. And what you're seeing in Pennsylvania is a disordered process and people who refuse to follow the process. And I think there needs to be a lot of accountability. Look, McCormick is the next senator. Bob Casey's setting the remainder of his reputation on fire with this because he will not be the senator. And he needs to accept that. Democrats need to be asked about it the same way Republicans would be asked every 5 seconds if it was Republicans that were, not considering what the court said. John Fetterman needs to be asked about it. Josh Shapiro needs to be asked about it. And they need to be asked, why don't you care that this illegal counting is taking place in Bucks County? And I'd love to hear their answers.
All right, Carol, last thing with you, Carol. You're in Florida now. You're from New York. I don't know how quickly you got to jump on or listen to what I talked about today, but I'm shocked at the cultural shift that's taken place in a short amount of time. People coming out of the woodworks all of a sudden, selling MAGA gear in LaGuardia. I mean, John Jones and NFL guys doing the Trump dance. Do you feel it too? Like something has happened out there. Something's changed on the streets.
Absolutely. I think it's been a cultural shift, which is amazing and wonderful. And I think people are starting to not be afraid to say that they voted for Donald Trump and this is what they're hoping will happen to the country. It's really been amazing seeing the Trump dance all over the NFL, which obviously the NFL is over once the Cowboys have collapsed. But, I hear that people still watch it, and there's the Trump dance and a lot of the touchdown dances, and it's fantastic. I saw your picture from LaGuardia Airport. Once New York falls, the rest can't be far behind.
I know. All right, so Neil Millward on YouTube says, Will, give us the Trump dance. So I can give you a Trump dance. Carol can give you a Trump dance right now. We appreciate you being on, Carol. By the way, you guys can check out Carol, the Karol Markowicz Show. She also co-hosts Normally. She's got a great book. It's been out a while now, but Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. And always check her out at Fox or the New York Post. Karol Markowicz, thanks for doing the Will Cain Show, Carol.
Thank you so much, Will. Nice to see you.
You bet. All right, maybe a little more Trump dancing. And then let's talk about what a new FCC commissioner means. Like, seriously, if not unlike Bucks County flouting the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, what about when Saturday Night Live just flouts the rules of the FCC? This could be a real come to Jesus moment for all these media companies that we're talking about. Next on the Will Cain Show. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com on the Fox News YouTube channel. Earth Extreme says, Will Cain, do the Trump dance as well. I was doing the Trump dance, and the boys in the militia back in New York said I'm not doing it right. And I've noticed, fellas, there's no consistency. Like, I see the guys on the field in the NFL. I see John Jones. Everybody's doing something a little different, So, young establishment, I'm doing it right or wrong? What do you? I was doing this.
You got to have the hands point out. If you go forward, it's not quite what he does. He does a little more of a...
We also have a guest in studio trying to do the dance, too.
Out from my body.
The elbow's got to be tucked in, and the hands got to go out. That's the most important part. And then you kind of get the hips into
like
it, where he only moves with,
do you go opposite,
the top of his body.
Or do you go with the punch?
Right. I didn't think about that.
And then I feel like this is what guys are doing, too, out there.
And then some of them add the golf swing.
I need to perfect the Trump dance. Oh, that's new. That's
awesome.
when you knew. Who did that? Some guys in the NFL did
Trump
that, and that's when it's undeniable. Oh, they're doing a Trump. They're doing a Trump thing. I'm saying since everybody's Trump dance is kind of different, you'd be forgiven for going, are they doing the Trump dance? But then when the guys throw in the golf swing, you're like, oh, they're doing the Trump dance. It's really clear. It's everywhere. Bink Pin on YouTube says, those voting for the first time are watching history. I've voted since Reagan, and nothing has ever been like this. You are very lucky. I totally agree with that. So at the top of the Will Cain Show today, I talked to you about a longtime listener going, is this right? Like he's up for the market correction, but seeing like the merch in LaGuardia, is this where we want to go? What I would just say is this is historic. I do believe we are living in a unique moment in history, and I think it's a good moment in history. Maximum potential. Talking about Pete Hegseth's tattoos. It's not just bigotry towards Christianity. It's hatred towards men in general. I agree. Maximum potential. King James says, Trump is not your typical politician, and that's why people love him. Again, I agree, King James. And I think that leads us to a worthy discussion we'll continue to have here on how much of this cultural and political movement extends beyond Trump. And then Suzanne says, the left seems to confuse worship with what is really a show of respect and excitement. She puts in parentheses, I'm not Will's boss, crying emoji, because Suzanne commented last week and I wasn't sure. She's blonde. Her name is Suzanne. Is she the president of Fox News? Right now, she is contending she is not the president of Fox News. So I totally agree, though, Suzanne, that this is not worship. It's excitement. That's what you're seeing here with this shift in culture. Kara Frederick is the director of Tech Policy Center at the Heritage Foundation. She's a visiting fellow at NSI, and she joins us now on the Will Cain Show. Hey, Kara.
Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. Did I hear you were doing the Trump dance, too? Is that what everyone was telling me?
I was trying, but I do want to tell you, you look more like a boomer than Trump does when you do it. I don't know how you managed to do that, but, Will, I think you need to work on it. Practice in front of the mirror. Come on. It's good effort.
That is the first time I've ever been accused of looking like a boomer, which, by the way, I mean, boomer's generation. I'll never be a boomer, but basically you're saying I look old, and that's not very nice, A, and B, it hurts my feelings, and C, it's going to make me very insecure, and I will spend some time in the mirror, Kara. No.
My job here is done.
I'm a TV host. I'm nothing if not narcissistic, you know?
Well, I'm not, and I'm still narcissistic, so I guess you're winning.
All right, Kara, great to have you here today on the Will Cain Show. I think I want to cover two topics with you in the time we have together today. So you have deep well and experience in intelligence, in tech. So first, I just kind of want to see what you think. We've got Michael Waltz, we've got Tulsi Gabbard, we've got some real different figures stepping into we've got John Ratcliffe at CIA. We have some real different figures stepping into the national security and intelligence apparatus, not to mention Pete Hegseth at DOD. Now, I do believe this doesn't represent marginal incremental change. This promises perhaps real reform. And I happen to think that could be good. I know people who have been in, I don't know where you're going to stand on this, Kara, who that represents a little bit of fear. What do you think about these types of people now at the tops of our intelligence and national security apparatus?
Well, Will, I'm with you all the way. We voted for this. We didn't just vote for the marginal changes, those incremental, tinkering around the edges. No, we noticed something was drastically wrong here, and we voted for people who are outside the system to come in this system and fix it in a massive way. And I think it points to this big trend, something that I learned when I was working for DOD, and then I was working for Naval Special Warfare, and then after that I went to Facebook. But I was working in the counterterrorism intelligence space for almost a decade. And what I saw were these tools that were ostensibly created for noble purposes, right? We're trying to fight Al-Qaeda. I was an Al-Qaeda analyst, a target developer, and a targeter. So we went after those guys who were trying to attack the United States. So we built these tools, call it a surveillance apparatus and surveillance tools, to basically find these terrorists. We call it finding needles in haystacks. But we noticed something sort of changing around 2016, definitely in 2017, when these tools appeared to be turning inward on the American people. And that only increased during the 2020 campaign and after, when the Biden-Harris administration came in and they started labeling parents at school board meetings domestic terrorists. They started looking at traditional Latin mass goers and saying, no, we're going to tag these guys as potential domestic terrorists. So what was created, what I gave, the beginning of my career in service to, 3 deployments to Afghanistan with Special Operations Forces targeting these guys, they took that apparatus and they turned it inward on people who think like us. And that should be the biggest red line for all Americans. And I believe we voted for people like Tulsi Gabbard. We voted for Trump to put people in like Tulsi Gabbard, like Pete Hegseth, like even John Ratcliffe, who was the DNI prior to, but he knows these systems now. He knows how to work and how to make them move to the will of the representative of the United States people. And I think that this is all to the good, because the status quo is not working for the American citizen.
I just want to walk down that chronological path because I think you laid it out really well. So we developed these tools initially to go after Islamists, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, domestic terrorists within the United States of America. There was obviously a shift, and it can be marked by most of our national security apparatus, including the FBI, suggesting that our biggest terrorist threat, this is open records, is domestic terrorism. That's what they say, right? It's the biggest threat on their priority list, domestic terrorism. Then they expand the definition of domestic terrorism, as you point out, to include traditional Catholic mass, people that go and protest at school board meetings. And then they use all the tools originally designed for what was our biggest threat to turn inward on what they're now saying is our biggest threat. So all those tools weaponized against Catholics or moms upset about transgender ideology making their way into school book curriculum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are two data points here that really, they cross the Rubicon for me. So in February 2022, DHS issued a terrorism bulletin that said spreading COVID-19 vaccine misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation is tantamount to terrorist activity. That, sharing a post on Facebook or on Twitter, now X, saying that maybe the efficacy of masks, maybe the efficacy of vaccines, maybe we should start thinking about this, is tantamount to terrorist activity, and the DHS is actually issuing bulletins saying as much. And then, you know this, but I worked for a big tech company after I left supporting the military, and we were targeting foreign Islamic extremists on the platform. And then there was a spin-off group that was created, and they basically said, we believe the whole counterterrorism industry has been focused too much on Islamist terrorism, and we need to redress that imbalance and start to look at domestic extremists. And as you know, what does that mean? It means people like you who think like you and me, and frankly, people that are white Christian men, like we're seeing Pete Hegseth being targeted as well. So that whole apparatus, these tools are created for a specific reason, for a specific purpose, and when they use those definitions, it means those authorities can be very vast. That remit is very vast, and they're doing it on purpose. So yeah, it's time to change the entire thing. Good on Trump for nominating these movers and shakers.
Speaking of someone he's nominated, Brendan Carr, for most people, wouldn't be somebody they know. If you do know him, you probably know him because just about a month ago, Kamala Harris appeared on Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live, of course, airs on NBC. NBC, ABC, and CBS are broadcast network channels. I don't mean to be pedantic, certainly to you, Kara, but anybody listening as well. That's very different than, although all of us now subscribe to cable, or we've moved to satellite dish, or we've moved to streaming service through YouTube or whatever it may be, it appears though they're all the same now. Like NBC and Fox News Channel are all on your same provider. But if you rewind, the clock a good 30 years, that's not the case. You had to have cable to get Fox, CNN. You got NBC, ABC, and CBS over your airwaves. You could get rabbit ears and you still can. But that's how it was for half a century. Because it used public airwaves, they're licensed by the federal government to use those airwaves by the FCC. And as part of the FCC licensing those airwaves to those three big channels, they were under the requirement of equal time and fairness. So when they give airtime to Kamala Harris, they have to, in kind, give airtime to Donald Trump during an election. They didn't do so. I think they made up for it on the back end after they violated this. But that doesn't apply to CNN. That doesn't apply to Fox News. That doesn't apply to ESPN. It applies to broadcast network. Well, now there's a new chairman who criticized Saturday Night Live and NBC in the wake of that incident. There's a new chairman of FCC, and it is Brendan Carr. He is now in charge. What do you think that represents for broadcast media?
Oh, I think it represents a return to free speech, a return to legitimate platform neutrality. Will, I love this appointment. I love Brendan Carr. I'm going to say it, not being obsequious. I've chatted with him a lot of times beforehand. He is a warrior for free speech. In fact, he is pretty much the only one who's been noticing these things on our behalf. So when I saw this nomination, I was like, this is amazing. The winners are the American people, and the losers are the censorship industrial complex, big tech, which he is just a fighter against those monoliths, and the Chinese Communist Party. What most people don't know is Brendan Carr has been a lion in the fight against TikTok, the Chinese Communist Party beholden platform that Congress passed a law in April, or Biden signed it into law this year, forcing it to divest to a U.S. company. Now, that's supposed to go into effect in January, kind of up in the air. We'll see what happens, but Brendan Carr has just been amazing in terms of the CCP infiltration in our information environment. So he does it all, and he's courageous. That's what I love about him. Not just physically courageous. Maybe you've seen those pictures of him on the cell towers. He climbs up with a hard hat. He's a man of the people, but he's also morally courageous. He has been the only one speaking out about this, especially about Saturday Night Live, when the entire zeitgeist, it seemed, was going against us before Trump got elected. And we realized, hey, pretty much over half the country's a secret Trump supporter, if not out in the open. So Brendan is just, I could not laud this pick more. That is a deft move by President-elect Trump.
That's a heck of an endorsement. That is really inspiring. Okay, she's the director of tech policy at Heritage, and it is Kara Frederick. She's on X at Kara A. Frederick. I always love having her on the show. Kara, thank you for being on the Will Cain Show.
Thanks, Will. Great to see you.
All right, there you go. These cabinet appointments about Donald Trump have been a fascinating news cycle over the last 2 weeks. It's like politics becoming fantasy football to watch all this. And I think I can speak for many. The hope is, the fantasy is, and I know that there are many on the left who are afraid. I've talked to some of them like, oh my God, this is everything I thought it was going to be. It's exactly the dystopian future that I was afraid of. Hang in there. Watch. Tell me, is free speech so bad? Is getting artificial ingredients and processed foods out of your diet so bad? Is transparency in data and medical decisions so bad? Is cutting back on the Pentagon that's my 7 straight audits and getting rid of something that is not meritocratic in our fighting force so bad? We've all, left or right, seen the United States government over the past half a century and gone, is that really what we should be doing? Is that really how we should be doing it? Should it really be that expensive? Maybe hang in there and just, maybe I'm not asking you to buy some gear, some Trump merch at LaGuardia Airport, but hang in there and see if this isn't better for America. That's going to do it for me today here on The Will Cain Show. Hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify. Join us again tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern time at YouTube and Facebook. And I'll see you again next time on The Will Cain Show.